July 2, 1956, RCA Studio 1, New York City. Elvis Presley stood before the microphone, 21 years old and terrified of the very thing he wanted most: love. Just months after losing his beloved mother's complete attention to fame, watching girls throw themselves at him for his celebrity rather than his heart, Elvis had become cynical about romance. When he began recording "Don't Be Cruel," the song transformed from a simple plea into something deeper, a young man's desperate prayer that someone, someday, might love him for who he was rather than what he represented. This is the story of how Elvis's deepest vulnerability became rock and roll's most famous request. Spring 1956, Memphis. Elvis Aaron Presley was experiencing success beyond his wildest dreams, but it came with a price he hadn't anticipated. Every performance brought screaming girls who tore at his clothes. Every public appearance attracted women who wanted to touch him, kiss him, claim a piece of him. But Elvis, raised by Gladys to be respectful and genuine with women, found himself increasingly unable to distinguish between those who wanted Elvis Presley the star and those who might care about Elvis the person. His relationship with his mother had always been the template for how he understood love: unconditional, protective, genuine. Gladys loved him when he was poor, when he was nobody, when he was just her boy. But now, as fame exploded around him, Elvis watched his mother struggle with sharing him with the world. The intimate relationship they had shared was fracturing under the pressure of his career, and it terrified him. If his own mother was struggling to love him through his fame, how could any other woman possibly succeed? The dating scene had become a minefield. Girls who had never looked at him twice in high school suddenly appeared at his shows, claiming to be old friends. Women threw hotel room keys onto the stage, wrote their phone numbers on intimate garments, propositioned him with a boldness that both excited and repulsed him. Elvis wanted passion, but he also craved authenticity. He wanted someone who would challenge him, not worship him. Someone who would tell him the truth, not just what he wanted to hear. There had been a girl in Memphis, June Wanico, who had come closest to understanding him. She treated him like a regular person, teased him when he got too full of himself, wasn't impressed by his fame. With her, Elvis could almost believe in the possibility of real love. But even that relationship was complicated by his touring schedule, by the constant presence of fans and reporters, by the impossible demands of being Elvis Presley. The fear that had begun to consume him was simple but profound. What if he was destined to be alone? What if his fame had become such a barrier that no one could ever truly reach him? What if every woman he met would eventually hurt him by choosing his celebrity over his humanity? The vulnerability this created in Elvis was raw and constant, making him simultaneously desperate for love and terrified of it. When Otis Blackwell's song, "Don't Be Cruel," landed on his desk in early July 1956, Elvis read through the lyrics with a shock of recognition. The plea in those words, asking someone not to use cruelty against a heart that was already offering. Everything felt like someone had reached into his chest and put his deepest fear into poetry. This wasn't just a song about a relationship. It was a prayer from a young man who was learning that fame made you simultaneously irresistible and untouchable. July 2, 1956, RCA Studio 1, New York. The session that day was supposed to be routine, but Elvis arrived with an intensity that immediately set the tone. He had been thinking about "Don't Be Cruel" obsessively since first hearing the demo, recognizing something in it that spoke to his current emotional state. The song's message was clear. "I'm giving you my heart. Please don't destroy it." Just because you can. What made the song revolutionary for its time was its emotional honesty wrapped in an upbeat package. The music was infectious, danceable, fun, but the lyrics were a vulnerable plea from someone afraid of being hurt. Elvis understood this duality instinctively because he lived it every day. On stage, he was confident, sexual, powerful. But privately, he was a young man terrified that his fame had made genuine love impossible. As the session began, Elvis made a crucial decision that would define the recording. Instead of singing the plea with sadness or weakness, he delivered it with strength and confidence. The message became not, "Please don't hurt me because I'm fragile," but rather, "I'm strong enough to be vulnerable with you. So don't betray that trust." This transformation was pure Elvis taking emotional honesty and delivering it with a swagger that made him irresistible. Recording sessions stretched for hours as Elvis worked to capture the perfect balance between vulnerability and confidence. He wanted the listener to understand that asking someone not to be cruel wasn't weakness, it was courage. It took strength to offer your heart to someone, knowing they had the power to destroy it. The song became his manifesto about modern love. "I'll give you everything, but I'm asking you to respect what I'm offering." The other musicians in the studio that day later recalled that Elvis seemed to be singing to someone specific, that they couldn't say ooh. In reality, Elvis was singing to every woman he would ever meet, every relationship he would ever attempt. He was setting boundaries before they were even needed, establishing that despite his fame and power, his heart was as fragile as anyone else's and deserved to be treated with care. When the final take was approved, Elvis knew he had created something special. "Don't Be Cruel" wasn't just a great song, it was his emotional mission statement. His way of telling the world that Elvis Presley, the superstar, still had Elvis Presley, the vulnerable human being inside. And that person was asking for kindness in matters of the heart. The recording captured something essential about the cost of fame and the universal human need to be loved authentically rather than used casually. August 1956, "Don't Be Cruel" exploded onto radio stations across America, quickly climbing to #1, where it would remain for 11 weeks. But the song's success revealed something unexpected. Elvis's personal plea had become a universal anthem. Teenagers across the country heard their own relationship fears in his words. The song spoke to anyone who had ever worried about being used, discarded, or treated carelessly by someone they cared about. For Elvis, watching the song's success was bittersweet. On one hand, he was thrilled that his music was reaching millions. On the other hand, the very fame that "Don't Be Cruel" helped create made the song's central plea even more relevant to his life. Every new screaming fan, every woman who approached him at concerts, every relationship attempt that failed, all of it reinforced his fear that people wanted Elvis Presley the commodity, not Elvis the man. His dating life became a paradox. Women were more available than ever, but genuine connection felt more impossible. Every conversation had an undercurrent of his fame. Every romantic gesture was complicated by whether it would end up in the newspapers. Every intimate moment was shadowed by the question, does she really care about me, or just what I represent? The plea in "Don't Be Cruel" became his constant internal monologue. June Juanico, one of the few women Elvis trusted during this period, later recalled that he would sometimes sing "Don't Be Cruel" to her quietly, as if reminding her of his vulnerability. He needed reassurance that she understood he was still the same person underneath the fame, still capable of being hurt, still in need of authentic care. But even that relationship eventually crumbled under the weight of his career and the impossible demands of being with someone the world claimed as public property. The song's message took on different meanings depending on who was listening. Young women heard it as romantic a handsome star asking to be treated gently. Young men heard it as a plea they wished they were brave enough to make themselves. Parents heard it as evidence that rock and roll music could actually contain emotional depth and maturity. But for Elvis, it remained what it had always been, a deeply personal statement about the loneliness that comes with being wanted by everyone, but truly known by no one. As the song dominated the charts Through late 1956, Elvis found himself performing it constantly. Each performance was a reminder of what he was asking for, but rarely receiving genuine human connection that transcended his celebrity. The irony wasn't lost on him that the more successful the song became, the more difficult its central request became to fulfill. His fame was building a wall around his heart, even as he publicly asked people not to be cruel to it. As 1956 turned into 1957, Don't Be Cruel had become one of the biggest hits of Elvis's early career, but its impact on his personal life was profound and lasting. The song had articulated something essential about his relationship with fame and love, creating a template that would define his romantic life for years to come. Every relationship he entered carried the weight of that original plea. Please don't use my vulnerability against me. The patterns established in this period Elvis, seeking authentic love while simultaneously being unable to fully trust anyone who offered. It would haunt his entire life. When he met Priscilla 3 years later in Germany, part of what attracted him was her youth and innocence. She hadn't been shaped by his fame yet, hadn't learned to see him as a commodity. She represented the possibility that someone could know him as a person first, before the legend overwhelmed everything else. But Don't Be Cruel also established Elvis's understanding of his own responsibility in relationships. The song wasn't just a plea for kindness from others. It was also an acknowledgement that he was offering something valuable, his genuine self, his vulnerability, his heart. This understanding made him, in many ways, a respectful and thoughtful partner. Even when his lifestyle and career made sustained relationships nearly impossible, the song's influence extended beyond Elvis's personal life into popular culture. Don't Be Cruel helped establish a new template for how men could express vulnerability in popular music. Before Elvis, male singers typically either crooned about love from a position of confident pursuit or sang sorrowfully about loss. Elvis created something different, a man asking for emotional respect while maintaining his strength and dignity. This was revolutionary for 1956 and remains powerful decades later. Performers who came after Elvis, from the Beatles to Bruce Springsteen to contemporary artists, all inherited this model of masculine vulnerability in music. The idea that a man could ask not to be hurt, could establish emotional boundaries, could demand respect for his feelings while still being seen as strong and desirable. All of this traces back to Elvis standing at that microphone in July 1956, singing a plea that was both personal and universal. Looking back, Don't Be Cruel stands as one of Elvis's most emotionally honest recordings. It captured a specific moment in his life, young, newly famous, terrified of what success meant for his ability to experience authentic love. But it also captured something timeless about human vulnerability. The song remains powerful, not because of its musical innovation or its commercial success, but because it expresses a fundamental human need to be loved for who you are, not used for what you represent. Don't Be Cruel became more than a hit song. It became Elvis's emotional declaration of independence, a statement that fame didn't strip him of his humanity or his right to be treated with kindness. The plea of a 21-year-old navigating sudden stardom became a universal anthem about respecting hearts brave enough to make themselves vulnerable. Elvis's fear became our collective wisdom, that true strength includes asking for gentleness. What songs have helped you set boundaries in relationships? Share this story and tell us about the music that taught you to ask for the respect you deserve. Subscribe for more stories about the human emotions behind the songs that define generations.